Did you got it? 3 weeks? Oh, it doesn't matter. No, do it later, Don.
Because of
Close. No, close.
At
Close.
least
Yeah.
UK, we don't make it. We will
Okay.
just
Hi everyone.
Hiya.
Hiya. I think there might be some people who aren't unmuted. Could I just ask everyone to check that they're muted, please?
I think is it-
globalist means if it were up to him, he would continue the world order as it is today. He wants NATO to be strong. He wants.
Hiya. I think there might be someone who's not on mute. Do you mind just having a check if it's you? Is it Ben White if you're there? And Elaine Robinson?
Yeah, I'm looking for it.
What the hell else do you want?
Let me
Fabulous.
see.
There we go, lovely. Thank you, everyone. Welcome to our the first Intellectual Impact Network meeting of 2026. That's exciting. Really pleased that you could all join us today. We've got a special theme to the session, which is a focus on social return on investment. I know this was a really popular theme when we featured it in an earlier meeting, so we just wanted to take some time to be able to deep dive into that topic. Let me while people are still joining the meeting, I just wanted to give a little refresh about the idea behind the network. So it's intended to be cross-sector, multidisciplinary, and its purpose is to be able to share and learn from best practice approaches to harnessing impact in order to in order to achieve measurable impact. That might be to help us target support or identify needs, to inform how we're developing services, how we're evaluating the support that we provide, how we tell stories in ways that can make a difference, how we can inform our advocacy and our campaigning activities, how we can inform funding allocations and grant making decisions, as well as strategic planning, and making sure that that practice can be standardised and embedded across as many arenas as possible. So we have a really packed agenda today. I'll be going first. I'm Insights and Impact Manager at National Energy Action, and I'll be talking about how we've used lived experience and the data that we collect to inform SROI modelling in order to demonstrate the wider social value of third sector interventions. Then we'll be hearing from Alessio Villanacci, Managing Director, Nabil Mahmood, Chief of Staff and Senior Associate, and Daniel Robinson, Associate at SROI Strategies. And they'll be talking about developing a social value framework and also issuing an invitation to engage. We'll have Nicole Edmonds, who's Vulnerability Lead at SPN, and she'll be giving a case study view of the social value frameworks which SROI have developed for the energy networks. And then we'll have Colin Nolden, who's a Senior Research Fellow at the University of Sheffield, and he'll be talking about measuring SROI in the community energy sector. Finally, we'll close the meeting with a Q&A, a chance to have a bit of discussion and answer any questions that you all might have. You'll notice that chat's enabled and Q&A is enabled. I'll be reviewing them throughout the meeting, so feel free to stick your questions in whichever of those you're most comfortable with. And I will, sorry, let me just have a look. Ozzy, I think you're in the meeting. While I'm starting my presentation, do you mind having a look to see if you can give Colin Nolden a new entrance link and then mark him as a presenter, please? He doesn't seem to be able to enter the meeting, but I'm just about to start presenting. So if you could give me a thumbs up that you've got that message. Yeah, fabulous. Thanks, Ozzy. Brilliant. So I will make a start. So like I said, I'm Insights and Impact Manager at National Energy Action, and my team have oh, sorry, is that me? No, okay. My team have been working with SROI over the past year. Oh, it seems to be a bit of feedback. Is anybody unmuted? Nope. Okay, that seems to be better. So over the past year, we've been working with SROI strategies to build a social return on investment model, which is reflective of the services that our charity provides to clients, their demographics and characteristics, as well as the nature of the impact that we as a charity secure. And I'm going to speak to you in a bit more detail about this today. So first of all, what do we mean by social return on investment? It's about capturing the full value created by a project, including at societal level. Whereas social impact looks at direct and measurable outcomes, social value models that broader difference made to society as a whole. And SROI expresses that as for every pound invested, we generate X amount in social value. So this isn't just about the pounds which are saved on bills directly, although it is also about that. It's about showing the monetised value of warmer homes and warmer homes to society. So things like improved mental and physical health, fewer GP visits and avoided costs to the NHS, low carbon emissions, peace of mind. For example, someone struggling with fuel debt might receive direct financial support. That not only eases their bills, but it also reduces things like their anxiety and improves their health and their well-being levels. And maybe that helps them to keep their home and their property more consistently, and it helps to maintain the condition of the building. And that's value. What SROI does is it gives us a consistent and evidence-based way to translate impact into something that's measurable and to capture value that would typically otherwise go uncounted if we're only looking at individual level impacts. The model allows National Energy Action to evidence a wider impact to policymakers, regulators and to funders, as well as helping inform our delivery and our decision making. And it allows us to be able to communicate that value clearly and consistently using a robust evidence-based method. It's important to highlight here that NEA has always made a real difference. What this framework does is it allows us and it helps us to make that difference easier to see, to measure and to build on. So as I mentioned, to develop the model, we worked with SROI Strategies, who led on producing an industry-wide SROI framework for the Energy Networks Association, or the ENA. And together we co-developed a model which reflects NEA's client base and the nature of the impact and outcomes that we secure, one which is reflective of lived experience. It's practical because we've taken SROI and we've aligned it to NEA's activities, both now and in the future. It's credible and robust because it's aligned with industry best practice and the Green Book. So whilst our SROI model is grounded in the experience of our own clients, it's nevertheless aligned with the approach taken by UK Energy Networks, and it's underpinned by HMT's Green Book and Social Value International's SROI guidance. To build the model, we followed the 7 principles of SROI, starting with engagement. That relates to our clients, those on the front line, to understand need and impact. It also speaks to change, so examining what would be appropriate financial proxies for the impacts that we can evidence. Transparency, building an inputs rulebook to sit alongside the model, which documents what's gone into it and the assumptions that have been made. Materiality relates to focusing on measuring the values and benefits which are important to us. And then not overclaiming is crucial. It means only measuring the values and benefits where we can reasonably claim input and effect and demonstrate that. Verification, so seeking independent assurance by developing it with experts, making sure it's grounded in HMT Green Book and, as I mentioned, international SROI guidelines. So within the model, we bring together 3 core inputs to estimate social value in a way which is transparent, consistent and repeatable. That includes financial proxies, which tell us the monetary value of different outcomes, discount factors, which in simple terms means adjusting for realism or for reality, so considering what would have happened anyway, how long the benefits last for, what's the drop-off like, how confident are we in the link, what the success rate is, and then multiplying that by the volume of support provided. We then need to subtract the costs before we arrive at a net benefit. Our SROI tool is a simple Excel-based tool, and it's used to forecast, report and test impact scenarios. It has been built for non-technical users. It's an inputs database, it's a library of over 100 evidence-based values that translate our services into monetary terms. We built it using trusted sources, but then tailored it to NEA activities. And we've structured guidance for gathering the right information, so valuation reflects actual delivery and the channel mix of the way in which we provided that support. For example, a financial proxy might be the average annual financial savings on bills made by households who enact energy efficient behavioural change. The Energy Savings Trust values this at £32. One discount factor could include the proportion of households who enact energy efficient behavioural change. It's quite a mouthful after receiving advice, which not everybody does. So we can't claim that 100% of financial proxies will be felt by everyone who receives the advice. At NEA, our client evaluation suggests that around 6 in 10 people actually go on to implement behaviour change advice, but that figure may vary for different organisations depending on their delivery approach, the services offered and their client characteristics. Another discount factor would be the proportion of clients who would have received the support elsewhere if NEA had not been available or able to. And within our model, that's set at around 1 in 10. We then multiply that by support volume, i.e. the number of households who received advice on energy efficient behaviour changes. And then to arrive at the net benefit, we then need to take away the cost of delivering the intervention for NEA. The steps that we followed to build the framework included working with SROI to define the outcomes that we wanted to measure and for which activities. We then worked to further understand how we could measure or evidence those outcomes. Those then fed into the development of an inputs database, which standardised the outcomes measurement alongside the Excel-based social value tool, which allows us to then quantify the impact. Once we were trained to use the model and the database internally, we've then been able to begin using the tool. It's not the end of the process. Going forwards, we'll be continuing to work with SROI to define and address any gaps that might exist in our data collection processes, which could then further inform the model, along with ongoing updates to the inputs database to reflect our delivery, the data that we collect and the outcomes that we're able to demonstrate for our clients. So it's an ongoing model. It's not a static resource that's developed at one point in time and then stands still. The underlying proxies which inform the model have been tailored to reflect existing robust evidence that can be demonstrably linked back to the characteristics of our client base and all the outcomes which we can evidence directly through our own evaluation and our case management data. The activities within the model reflect the breadth of our delivery with clients, and they encompass energy advice, income maximisation support, energy efficiency measures, crisis, emergency and hardship support, and it also assesses the value of our training and education work. Our standardised evaluation has enabled the incorporation of unique approaches for calculating monetary value of impact, particularly on things like wellbeing. So within our model, we can look at the health and wellbeing benefits of living in a warm home, energy and financial capabilities, improvements to thermal comfort and dwelling conditions. Because that's embedded in our evaluation and we can demonstrate a proportion of clients who report that outcome, it's then easier for us to link that back to the benefit category and the evidence that kind of allows us to develop a proxy from there. So just an example here, we use the model to look at our SROI for our delivery in 2024-25, and doing so allowed us to see that our activities to directly support clients unlocked £14.23 in social value for every pound invested. That reflects the impact of our work in helping people stay warm, safe and financially secure in their homes, including through energy advice, income maximisation, crisis support and practical measures that reduce financial and health risks. The value is expressed as unlocked social value, capturing the full benefit generated through NEA's support during the year, and it's based on the scale and type of activity that we delivered. When we look at our training for 24-25, the model tells us that we unlock £2.67 in social value for every pound invested within 1 year of having provided the training. And it did so by equipping frontline professionals and community partners with the knowledge and skills needed to support vulnerable households. As I said, that figure reflects the unlocked value of the training delivered within 1 year, which shows the total benefit created through increased local capacity. Over an average working lifetime, which is set at 25 years, modelling shows that the training programmes unlock £63 in social value for every pound invested. Just by way of a disclaimer and to communicate why the figures may differ to those used in other industry norms, I need to highlight two deliberate methodological choices which were made during the development of the tool to enable us to capture the full scale of societal impact that we have. That includes the use of total unlocked social value with attribution set to 0% and the inclusion of financial benefits which are realised as a one-off at the point of delivery. We also assume that the impact of support we provide to clients will drop off. It has a drop-off rate of 100% after 1 year of benefits being realised for most of the activities that have been included in the model. And that's due to the difficulty of robustly demonstrating year-on-year accrual or persistence of benefits before we can credibly build them into the model. So it's something that we will be looking to address through our future data collection. Can we show that the benefits we secure for clients persist after 1 year or continue to accrue after that year? At the minute we can't, so the model has been built to reflect that. I also wanted to talk about something really important here too. It's important to remember that although SROI modelling allows us to understand the wider social value of activities we've delivered and allows us to evidence that value to policymakers, to funders, to partners, we should always remember that the financial value of benefit to society as a whole shouldn't determine how we design projects and the support that we offer. For that, our aim should always be to secure benefit at individual level, because there will be some activities which simply cost us more to deliver compared to the net value they bring to society. There will be people who can present greater challenges to support effectively than others, which again can impact upon costs and delivery models. And there are some types of activity which may have lower benefit to society in monetary terms, but mean a lot to the person who has come to us for help. There might be delivery models which are cheaper to deliver, but with the trade-off of different approaches to do so. And it's that value, that ability to change lives for the better, to make a difference to a real person, that should determine how we design our support. Social value in terms of the pound return on investment comes after that. It should be something we use to understand the outcomes of what we've done rather than treat it as a target to make ourselves attractive to funders, for example. Because if what we're interested in is hitting the highest SROI values, then we'll find that impacts for individuals, those life-changing ones that we're so proud of, could begin to drop off, and that's the last thing that we want. So I just wanted to kind of emphasise that before we go any further. SROI is really important. It begins crucial evidence that we can use, but it shouldn't drive us. Our evaluation, how we measure impact on individual clients, allows us to see and understand the difference that we make and the true value of what we do for real people. SROI is added value to that, not the driving factor of what we're trying to achieve. So I'm now going to briefly run through the activities which form the foundation of our inputs database. Before I do so, just wanted to flag that our model also includes additional assessment parameters. So we look at the year of assessment and the weighted average cost of capital. We look at the cost to provide a service, and they're either inputted at activity level or when that's not available as a single overall cost across all activities per year. And then in each section of our model, we enter the year costs, just the total number of service units delivered and the delivery channel splits. We use that to then run our SROI calculation. So first up, we have energy efficiency advice, with activities falling under behaviour change advice and condensation and damp advice. You can see here we have benefit categories ranging from annual financial savings to environmental benefits and public sector savings, which are linked to bill savings, carbon savings and NHS savings from excess coal hazard mitigation. We also include wider economic benefits like avoided cost of treating damp and mould removal. And then, as I mentioned, through NEA's internal evaluation, we're able to demonstrate our own success rates and a dead weight which is reflective of our clients and our impacts. We also look at financial support and the immediate direct financial savings from that, along with wellbeing benefits such as avoiding financial distress and the environmental benefits derived from carbon savings, for example, from common energy efficiency measures. And again, from our internal evaluation, we apply our own success rates and discount factors reflective of our clients and our services. For home safety advice, we look at carbon monoxide in terms of both advice provision and tool provision. And that includes benefits like public sector savings of avoided NHS costs resulting from carbon monoxide fatalities. Sorry, the text on this screen is a lot smaller than I had anticipated, so do apologise. I will be sharing the slides afterwards. But we do look at common insulation measures. Yeah, we look at common insulation measures, including immediate direct financial savings, environmental benefits, and public sector savings too. Again, this is a small one because there's so much in there, but these will be shared afterwards so you can have sight. We include energy efficiency measures ranging from gas appliance repair, gas appliance replacement or servicing, new heating systems, and measures such as heat pumps and solar PV. Again, the benefit categories that we look at range from public sector savings through savings to the NHS, to the environmental benefits of lower carbon emissions, and the immediate direct financial savings of avoiding the cost of the service or measure themselves. So quite a wide range of benefits. We also look at vulnerability services, so specifically enabling someone to sign up to the Priority Services Register or the PSR. And that can bring benefits which are kind of immediate direct financial savings, such as avoiding the cost of accessible or translated information, or the cost of having to access emergency support in a supply interruption. And again, through our internal evaluation, we can demonstrate our own success rate for that and the discount factors which are then applied in the model. For meters, we look at things like the environmental, the well-being and annual financial savings of providing smart meter advice, of tariff and supplier switching support, as well as water social tariff advice. We also include a series of what we call actuals-based activities, whereby we directly input the proxies according to the financial outcomes that we secure for clients. So be that through benefits and income maximisation support, fuel utility debt support, and customer redress. So the proxies used there will vary year on year depending on the financial outcomes that we've been able to secure for our clients. When it comes to income maximisation, as well as the benefit side, we also look at the income maximisation of energy advice too, including things like one home discount and winter fuel payments. And finally, we incorporate the value which is generated through the provision of emergency care package support. So looking at immediate and annual financial savings, environmental benefits, and wider economic benefits of volunteering as well. We also look at the wider lifetime economic benefits of our training qualifications, short courses and education work as well. Again, we have that figure for kind of the year of delivery, but then looking over a working lifetime too. So that's a very whirlwind introduction to the model. As I mentioned earlier, although it's aligned with the ENA approach to SROI, it's aligned with the Green Book and other industry standards. Our model is also grounded in NEA service delivery, our client profile, and the impact of our services that we're able to evidence. And it's that inclusion of inputs tailored to NEA activity, data, and evidence, which mean that the model isn't directly applicable for use by external agencies or immediately replicable for other agencies. The underlying inputs database in the tool are the IP of SROI strategies. NEA more than happy to discuss our approach to standardised evaluation and case management, with a view to helping others understand how that's helped us to generate the data and insight that we feed into the co-produced model. SROI strategies, as you'll hear from Nabil shortly, can discuss possible approaches that might work for you in your organisation, and I'll be handing over to Nabil imminently. We've obviously got room for questions at the end of the session today and discussion points, but if anybody does want to get in touch with me afterwards, you can see my email address on screen, and this will also be circulated afterwards, so do feel free to reach out. Always happy to have a chat with anybody who's interested. Got 5 minutes to spare. I think it's probably best if we go straight to Stereo, who can share their perspective of the journey, and then we can have space for questions afterwards. Nabil, are you happy to start, Sarah? Yeah, already there. Fantastic. Over to you.
Yeah, no, of course. Thank you, Jamie, and hi, everyone. I'm Nabil, representing Stereo today. We're a specialist consultancy working in social value measurement across the UK energy sector, but also the fuel poverty landscape. So over the past year, as Jamie sort of mentioned, we've been working closely with herself and the team to develop NEA's social value framework. And really today's session is about sharing, what we built with NEA, why we built it that way, and also I think it provides an opportunity to open up a broader conversation about how social value could be embedded, potentially more consistently or defensively across organizations like yours. So thank you, Jamie. I think you teed it up very well, but I'll go a bit more into the different components and sort of how this works in practice. We'll start with a brief note on us. We certainly haven't engaged with everyone on this call. Thanks everyone for joining. We specialize in social value and impact measurement. In particular, I think there's sort of a niche where organizations are after something that is rigorous enough for, parties that include funders and regulators, but also practical enough to be used by delivery teams. So we've developed standardized benefit frameworks across the entire UK energy network landscape. So these are sort of, regulated monopolies, as well as for industry bodies such as the NEA. With NEA specifically, the focus was on building something that works in the real world in the form of a framework that supports forecasting, reporting, but also, embedding learnings over time. So in short, something that's not static. In terms of what I'll cover today, I'll cover 3 things off. So we'll briefly touch, on the challenge that NEA sort of set out to address when they engaged with us. We'll talk to the core components of the framework that we developed, and then we'll have sort of some discussions on, where this conversation can go next. I'll then head it over to Nicole Edmonds, who's the vulnerability lead at SP Energy Networks. She's kindly joined, and she's going to speak at the end of the presentation to provide a short reflection from an energy network client perspective. Provides a little bit of a taste of, how this has worked in that industry. So I think the most important thing to start with here, and Jamie spoke to this as well, is that NEA's always delivered meaningful outcomes. So that wasn't really the problem or the challenge that we were facing. What that challenge was how to evidence, compare, and communicate that impact in a way that is robust, efficient, but also grounded in lived experience, as we spoke to earlier. So what the team were very clear on, from the start, was that this needed to do a few things. What those things were to sort of leverage data that NEA already collects. One thing that we definitely tip our hats off to with NEA is they have very strong data collection processes already in place. So some of the elements of the framework that I'll speak to shortly are very closely tailored to what they're doing on the ground. And that's sort of one area that sets this one apart. Number 2 is, feeding into that is the ability within the framework to, take that data and actually leverage it. So, sort of reflect what actually happens on the front line into the inputs database. And then number 3, I've touched on this a bit briefly already, but it's really a focus on developing something that isn't static, isn't stuck in time, if you will. So it's really important in our experience to be, to develop frameworks that are flexible, that allows them to evolve as services or partnerships or sort of, the wider landscape changes over time. I think we've been working in this space for about, I'd estimate 7 years, and we all know how much, something as simple as sort of the world has changed in that period, let alone aspects to do with low carbon technologies, net zero targets, fuel poverty, things that are feeding into it. So it's really important to have something that's not stuck in time. And that was one of the underlying foundations, if you will, of this framework. So in short, to summarize, the ambition here and the challenge was to develop a framework that makes impact more visible, measurable, and ultimately more actionable, not just in the short term, but also in the longer run. I'll now briefly touch on the three core components of the framework, which Jamie went into them in a bit more detail, and the ones that are sort of tailored to their activities. But these are sort of the three aspects of the recipe, if you will, that typically go into something that is, I would say, sort of considered best practice in the space. So at a high level, the framework has three core components, which are visualized here. Number one is a standardized inputs database. What that sort of means in English is it's the evidence base that translates outcomes into values in a consistent way. So I'll cover this in more detail on the next slide, but really what this contained were some of the proxies that Jamie was speaking to that are linked to the activities and some of the underlying aspects around that. Number two here is a SROI valuation tool. So in this case, what this was it was an Excel-based model. It basically enables teams to take that inputs database and to effectively allow non-technical users through a simple front end to forecast, report, and also scenario test social value without really needing to be technical specialists or to know every nook and cranny of the specific inputs database. So that's sort of what sits on top of it that allows you to create the valuations. I guess it's the engine that sort of runs all of the formulas and produces the end figures, if you will. And again, we'll show you a brief screenshot just of what that looks like. And number three, which again Jamie spoke to, is sort of a data collection process. The idea here is that over time, NEA can continue to integrate their specific evidence to make sure that let's say on a semi-annual or an annual basis, that the data that they're collecting feeds into the standardized inputs database to make sure that things stay current. As sort of mentioned, this is something that we're looking to continue to develop over time and sort of develop further in the coming months. NEA is already doing a great job in this area, and I think one thing that's important to note is number three, sort of that data collection process is really what enables, at least in the long term, different organizations to have tools or sort of databases that are a bit more tailored to their operations, if that's sort of the case. So I think what's important to note here, just before I go more into detail on the first two aspects here, is that the pieces are really designed to work together. So it's not really a standalone model or a standalone inputs database. The idea here is that nothing's stuck in time, but they're kind of integrated into a living framework that can be maintained, but also used over the years. So it's quite it's an investment that's made rather than sort of a one-off type of short-termist approach, if you will. I just mentioned the three different components. I'm going to go into detail on a couple of the different ones here, particularly things that we've sort of already developed to date for NEA, but also for some of our other clients. So what we really get to here when we're speaking about the standardized inputs database is getting to the heart of the sort of consistency or defensibility angle of things. So specifically for NEA, the database that we put together brings together over 100 evidence-based proxy values, covering and sort of translating to around 35 NEA-linked activities. So, depending on the organization, these numbers can scale up, they can scale down as much as you sort of need to. But this sort of enables you to, link things such as behavioral change advice or crisis support, as Jamie spoke to during her presentation, to evaluation engine. So each proxy is paired with discount factors, which I'll get into a little bit more on the right here. These sort of reflect real world considerations. So these include aspects such as attribution, that sort of or duration, how long benefits are going to last, or the likelihood of change taking place. Quite importantly, these are informed by externally established SROI guidance elements and Green Book principles. And in this case, they were closely developed in collaboration with NEA teams. So I think what the key point here isn't the specific numbers, but it's the structure. Having a shared and evidence-based starting point creates a level playing field within your organization, just sort of across delivery partners, across time periods, and across reporting contexts. So this is really, I think, what gives confidence from an internal standpoint and credibility from an external standpoint. I'd say, during the development process, this input database was, probably the aspect that took the most time and the most amount of care. And I want to briefly just touch on, a high-level example of, what this looks like from an activity angle to bring it to life. So of course, you would just like to note that we've stripped any of this NEA specific data out, as that's sort of IP that they own. But here there's sort of an activity that we find is quite broadly used across, all of our clients. So this is sort of the idea of behavioral change advice, maybe working with people to help them change the way that they use energy in their homes, for example. So some of the common benefits that sort of fall under this activity. So the activity is something that is identified to begin with. Then sort of when we're building out that standardized inputs database, the first step that's taken is to define the different benefits that would come under it. So the types of benefits include, annual bill savings from more efficient use of energy in their homes. And, linked to that could be annual carbon savings linked to more efficient energy use in their homes. The types of, proxies, if you will, that could be employed for something like this, and these are two very commonly employed proxies, are, those financial savings, taken from sources such as the Energy Saving Trust of £32. There's one listed here as an example with an associated carbon saving. Where I mentioned a little bit earlier, there is an opportunity, and it's not something that is always needed. I just think it's something that's a real strength of this framework, which is why I keep touching upon it. So the NEA specific one is when, there might be data that can sort of inform those discount factors. So you might kind of consider elements such as, if you give someone behavioral change advice, these benefits tend to accrue. But the reality is that, maybe not everybody is going to enact them. So with the NEA, we were able to sort of work together and get some data that reflected, the proportion of their clients that report positive behavior changes after receiving this advice, or, in some cases, if you're speaking to people, they might already be doing something. So that's, again, sort of another discount factor, which, again, we were able to work with NEA to understand how many clients may have accessed similar support without the intervention. Of course, at this point, I'm going into the detail of something that's heavily tailored. There are different options that exist. There are sort of, industry-wide rule books that are used between our energy network clients where everything isn't tailored to one of the clients. It kind of just depends what you're after. But again, this is one of the real strengths of the framework here, which is why I keep hammering it home. But I'll stop now. The next aspect of the framework that we want to kind of zoom into a little bit is the valuation tool. So what this really does is it operationalizes effectively everything that we've been speaking about, and it follows a very simple logic in terms of, these are typically design principles that we have in place. So what it does is it enables non-technical users to forecast, report, or potentially even scenario test different impacts through a non-technical front end. So the key here is that you don't need to be an expert in financial modeling. You don't need to be an expert in economic appraisal. You don't need to be, you don't need to hire a consultant necessarily to sort of run these projects for you once a framework's in place. But there's 3 steps in place. So number 1 is, the users will select the activities from a dedicated window within the valuation tool. Number 2, delivery costs are entered. So very simply sort of the costs of the investments that are being made, linked to the duration and the number of beneficiaries is inputted. And number 3, the sort of the volumes, the number of beneficiaries each year that benefit from specific services are inputted. Once those are inputted, you're sort of presented with a live dashboard, which is snapshotted here at a high level. What this really shows is social value metrics over time. So this includes the ability to look over specific periods, scenarios, maybe changes in delivery mix. And, again, sort of something that's really important here is the accessibility angle. It's not really designed to sit in your organization with one technical analyst. Of course, it could, but it's something that we are witnessing sort of program teams and non-technical users engage with directly while still aligning to best practice SROI principles. So we think this framework sort of brings together a lot of our learnings of working in the social value space for 5 to 7 years. And we're really proud of the result that we've sort of co-developed alongside Jamie and the team. Of course, we've spoken in detail about what we've developed for the NEA. What we want to kind of touch on now is just take a step back and mention that, of course, part of why we're having this call, and thank you to all of you who have joined, who I think there's about 75 people here and 120 who've signed up, is that we are observing sort of a growing demand for social value frameworks, both within the energy sector, but also beyond. Crucially, I think one thing that's required across the board is frameworks that are both rigorous but also practical. So a number of organizations and a range of stakeholders have sort of come forward to ask whether potentially a similar approach could work in their context. Obviously this could be tailored to your own activities or your own data, etc., to whatever extent you'd like that to be. Rather than preempting what that looks like, we wanted to basically take this opportunity to open up that conversation. So if this resonates with you, what we sort of have is what we've developed is a short registration of interest form via the QR code on the right. It's deliberately, light touch, and it's really just a way for us to potentially have a one-to-one call in a smaller setting and to continue the discussion after today. And to be clear, we do just want to note that NEA's data is client-specific and confidential, so none of that's transferable, but what is transferable could be sort of the approach and the thinking behind a framework. So what we'll do is that QR code should work, but I believe I'll also share the slides with Jamie after the session. We'll circulate these. So please, it really is an invitation to engage. If anyone would like to speak about this further, just feel free to fill in the survey. The link is also below, and we would really enjoy the opportunity to discuss this further with the relevant parties. Of course, before I just hand it off to Nicole, we want to ground this in practice a little bit. So, would like to thank Nicole for joining the session, but I'll hand it over to her now. Again, she's the vulnerability lead at SP Energy Networks, and she's kindly agreed to share a brief reflection of sort of what embedding social value frameworks has meant from an energy network perspective. This is a client we've worked with over the years, and we're really happy that they're able to speak to it. So, Nicole, over to you, please.
Thanks, Nabil. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today's session. It's been really interesting hearing everybody so far. And I'm aware that you've listened to a lot of people talk, so I'll try and keep this short and sweet. The rulebook, there's three main things, sorry, that the SROI is really focused to support me specifically in my role to do. So with the standardised rulebook, it means that it's really easy for me to compare services. And our services, so the services that I've got are, we've got fuel poverty, we've got low carbon technology, we're comparing apples and oranges here realistically. But by applying the logic here, it means that we're really able to see the impact that these services are having in the local communities that they deliver, which is excellent. It also limits human error, which is something that we're all capable of doing. And it gives the smaller organisations that I'm working with, so for example, I work with the likes of Hope for You and Citizens Advice. They're very different in sizes, very different in terms of delivery, but it gives them a level playing field of how well is their service reaching the community and delivering to the needs of the people in those areas. The assurance that we've got from this is that the logic is best practice across the industry. So it really simplifies every decision that we're looking at and makes a lot of things easier for me to do going forward. And finally, in terms of the delivery management platform that we've had built, it's just that I don't know how I would do my job without it, to be quite frank. It allows me to be able to see current delivery, that we are able to then demonstrate the impact of our current works that we've got and the amount of social value delivered in certain time periods. It's great for our internal regulatory and public facing reporting because people can kind of understand, oh, that actually has like a monetary value to it, and they can see that there and then. We're also, with the model that we've had built, we're also able to actually change things. So, for example, if someone's service changes, the way that they actually support someone changes slightly, we're able to change that within the model to reflect that. We're also able to change things like I can view how much of an impact this will have in 6 months or 3 years' time, which, as you can imagine, when you're looking at your services going forward, it makes a huge difference being able to almost see into the future. And it really does, as I say, kind of, it gives that level playing field again across, so that it's not just a one person's site, if you like. So I'm aware that that was quite quick, and maybe too quick for some. So if you've got any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. But unfortunately, I'm going to have to shoot off in the next 10-15 minutes. So if you do, I'll put my email address in the chat box if that's okay. So that if anybody wants to reach out to me to speak about this any further, then I'd be more than happy to. SROI have been fantastic in supporting SP Energy Networks with this and helping me maintain it, because I am not the most savvy person when it comes to SROI, but certainly Nabil and his team have made it my job a lot easier to be able to manage this.
Amazing. Thanks, Nicole. Means a lot, and really appreciate you talking through that. Jamie, that's all from our end. So we're happy to hand it back over to you for the last presentation, and then of course we can take any questions at the end. But thanks again, Nicole.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Thanks so much for that, Nabil and Nicole. We're a little ahead of schedule, and we have some questions in the chat and Q&A already, and I'm conscious, Nicole, that you're going to have to head off shortly. So we'll have can have a few questions based on the first two presentations now, and then we can go to Colin and then have a bit more room for discussion at the end as well. Specifically, Nabil, we've had a question. Simon Kilshaw from Green Doctors in Yorkshire has very rightfully highlighted the importance of being able to distinguish within the model different delivery channels. So in-person, face-to-face advice is going to have a different kind of impact to a community event or paper-based support. So we do, through NEA's reporting, we evidence the different kinds of delivery channels that we have, and those assumptions are built into the model. We have a question around kind of the weightings which are given to those different approaches. So I don't know if you'd be happy to speak to kind of your approach to that.
Yeah, no, of course. Hi, Simon. Good to meet you. It's a very good question. I think that's something that this type of issue sort of came about as we found the industry was maturing a little bit more in the space. And what I can tell you is that we do sort of have proprietary data that does actually reflect the differences between aspects including home visits versus telephone advice. I think it even goes as far as billboard advertisements. So this was something that we initially developed through engagement with experts in the vulnerability and fuel poverty space that were sort of delivery partners with some of our clients. So we sort of issued out a survey and did sort of a quite wide encompassing engagement program to understand the differences between these different channels, it's a very good point. It's something that we do have. It's something that if you reach out, we're happy to discuss further. But yeah, absolutely, we do have that kind of data on hand within the framework.
And thanks, Nabil. We also have a question from Anna Henderson. So she has asked about how much auditing and checking is required to be able to ensure that an activity which is represented by a proxy is actually fully delivered. From NEA's perspective, as a charity, we're independently audited each year, where our delivery against what we are reporting is fully audited and checked. So we're able to provide reassurance from that side for ourselves as a charity. But I wonder if this speaks more widely, Nabil, to kind of representation of activities within SROI modelling in general, and how that might vary across the sector and the industry as well. I don't know if it's something that you'd like to speak to.
Yeah, no, definitely. I can speak to sort of the assessment and auditing aspect. So again, similar to the first question, really good question. It's another point that's sort of come up as the industry has matured a little bit, and without going into too much detail, some of our energy network clients have specific I guess incentives or KPIs or metrics that they need to reach, which are tied to social return on investment. So as a result, in a case, specifically, in a case like that, the need for quite a comprehensive sort of auditing program is something that's required. We have designed and delivered those programs in the past, so I can say that it is very important. Those programs aren't overly simplistic, but the opportunity to kind of go and understand and sort of ensure that the values that are being used are rigorous, again, sort of stay up to date, things like that are some of the aspects that we check as part of an audit process. But I think if that's not answering your question, please just let me know. But I think it is important. It is something that is in place, and something that we've done in the past.
Thank you. We've got another two questions as well. So the first one is from Danielle Johnson, who, Nicole, she thanks you for the overview provided and asks if you could give an example of how you've used the framework to demonstrate social value to your vulnerable customers.
Thanks, Danielle. Yeah, so we in DNOs we do things slightly different from I use it slightly different. However, I can say, for example, we did a trial to have a look at our low carbon technology delivery back in 23-24 when we first started working with Serial. Well, when I started working with Serial, because I just joined the company, and we did a trial to see what it is that we're actually delivering and how that would impact. And we had a net profit value of £1,280 through an initial trial of 62 customers. So we were able to see that that's how much we were able to support our customers there. The value captures benefits such as financial savings, environmental benefits, stemming more from like energy efficiency, use linked in with in-depth and tailored advice provided by customers. But we're also able to capture the benefits for example, if it's like our fuel poverty customers where they'll receive direct benefits. So we were able to see that we delivered £746,565 in gross benefits by referring 3,730 customers into tailored welfare and fuel poverty support. Whereas before, it would be kind of ballpark figures, or it would be someone on a spreadsheet that would have collected all this information. So having this model already built to kind of do that for us just was an absolute peace of mind. And this was, as I say, I've just pulled this really quickly just to try and answer your question. But this was about 2 years ago now, so it's moved on quite a bit. I hope that helps.
Thanks, Nicole. We've got more questions coming, so I've got another two that I can see, so we'll take those and then we will hear from Colin, and then again more room for questions at the end. So there's a question from Hannah who's asking roughly what the ratio of effectiveness for the different delivery channels is in terms of home visit versus telephone versus online, for example. Hannah, that's something Nabil mentioned. It's proprietary data which is held by Serial, so it is kind of based on research which they've carried out. It's embedded in our inputs database, which I mentioned, which is kind of the rule book which sits alongside the model. And I think this is something, again, Nabil, you might be happy to speak to it, but in terms of being able to demonstrate robustness of the model, there is that interplay between kind of intellectual property of developers for each kind of approach and model, and then being able to use the rule book to demonstrate that robustness and the evidence which sits alongside it to kind of strategic stakeholders, core stakeholders when required. So if a government department or regulator, for example, needs to see the evidence of how it is that we have come to those conclusions and those outcomes, we're able to demonstrate it, but it's not necessarily something which we're able to publicly share in general. Nabil, I don't know if there's anything else that you'd like to come in on.
No, I mean, thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Hannah, for the question. Good question, Jamie. I'd largely echo what you said. I think, one thing that we can maybe speak to at a high level is just the fact that, the difference between sort of the most effective delivery channel versus the least effective it is multiples, so there is quite a large difference there. But otherwise, I'd have to echo what Jamie stated. But we're sort of happy to potentially take that offline.
Thank you. And then last question before we come to you, Colin. So I'm just flicking between the Q&A and chat, and now my Q&A screen has frozen. Here it is. So we've got a question from Rachel Riley, who is asking about, in terms of carbon and financial savings, does the framework and tool take into account changes in projected energy costs and decarbonisation of the grid over the expected lifetime of the outcome or benefit? And are the financial savings discounted or nominal?
Yeah, so it does take account all of these aspects. These are elements that are aligned with, these are sort of where like some of the SROI principles or the Green Book principles come into place. In terms of the question around whether it is discounted, it's an interesting question. It depends on, it can either be nominal or it can be discounted. So by default, there's discounting that's taking place by the social discount rate, which is I believe it's 3.5% between 0 to 30 years, without getting too into the weeds of it. This is something that's sort of mandated and has been released via the HMT Green Book. But there's also the opportunity to report things nominally. Just kind of that last part of the question depends on the nature of reporting that our clients are doing. So I think with NEA by default it is discounted, but some of our energy clients have a regulatory requirement to report real values year over year. So in that case, they would be nominal.
Thanks, Nabil. Can't see any more questions. So Colin, are you happy if we come over to you? Sorry, I can't see you on my screen. I've got 5 separate screens open. If yes, are you happy to share your slides directly?
I am, yes. 1 second.
There you are. Hiya.
Hiya. So can you see my slides
Yeah, perfect.
in presentation mode as well?
Yeah, we can just see the viewer view.
Okay, so sorry, can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to report from the relatively early stages of a project where we're looking to measure the social value in the community energy sector. So this is some reporting mainly actually from a research project which is funded by the Energy Demand Research Centre. And this is research which I've been undertaking with Jake Barnes from the University of Oxford, Caroline Bird from the University of Bristol, and then Ben White, who works for Community Energy Pathways. I should also add here that I'm also a non-executive director of Community Energy Pathways, so I've kind of 2 avenues of involvement here. So the problem with measuring community energy is akin to the short story on the exactitude of science, right? This is a famous story of this civilization which wanted to create the perfect map, and they eventually created a map the size of their entire land to make it as precise as possible. And this is the same issue with social value. If we really want to create perfection in the measurement of social value, we will do nothing but measuring social value. So we need to strike a middle ground between perfection and practicality. And so how we're approaching this from an academic perspective is that we're using insights from transaction cost economics. Now, this is usually used in the context of insourcing and outsourcing decisions. Now, that might seem like quite an unusual starting point, but the key point really that we are interested in is that it's working out the trade-offs between different modes of governance. And the key trade-off that we are interested in is what are the trade-offs between the ability to demonstrate and amplify social value and the transaction costs of capturing social value. Because especially within the community energy sector, we're talking about lots of small organizations. Some of them are entirely volunteer run. They just don't have the resources to capture the social value that they're no doubt delivering, right? So we're looking to develop or at least co-develop a framework or provide input into the development of a framework for the community energy sector to enable the multiple types of social value to be captured. So now, just to give you an idea of what the community energy sector is, I'm going to, on the next slide, I'm going to present some information which has been captured by various organisations which are active in this space. So this is Community Energy England, Community Energy Scotland, and Community Energy Wales. And this is sponsored by SP Energy Networks. So shout out there to SP Energy. This is quite a broad overview of what a community energy sector is, in case you don't know what it is, okay? The community energy sector is as yet to be defined, but a current official definition is actually being sought by GB Energy. So in the coming months, we probably get an official definition of what community energy is. It probably will be akin to what the European Union's definition is, because it doesn't make sense to diverge too far from what their definition is, so that funding pots can be accessed through Horizon and LIFE programs and so on. So community energy basically is, it is commonly thought about renewable energy development owned by people within local communities, but it's actually a lot more than that. And as we can see here, it is about owning community or renewable energy capacity, which is at the top left, generating power, which is the center left, as we get 575 gigawatt hours of renewable energy power, and so on. But also interestingly, on the right hand side, it is also about, so if we move to the right hand side in terms of the contribution to the local economy at the bottom right, we see financial contribution to the local economy is about 24.5 million. And it's this kind of social value that we're not really quite sure about. We have an idea, but we want to be able to establish much more reliable figures in terms of what community energy is contributing to the local economy, but not just to the local economy, but also actually in terms of well-being to the people that are reached, for example, through fuel poverty advice. It's a very diverse sector, as we can see in the top middle, 614 organizations, and there's a fairly kind of more or less even spread here between community benefit societies, community interest companies, limited companies, co-ops, and so on. And these range from fairly professional setups with like 25 full-time members of staff to loads of organizations that are just basically on volunteer hours, as we can see at the bottom, where we have got 4,600 volunteers compared to around 1,000 full-time equivalent employees. And we want to really work out what the value is generated by these different types of organizations, by the different kinds of services that they provide, whether this is renewable energy generation or fuel poverty advice. It's a big ask, but it kind of links into the kind of work, obviously, that National Energy Action and SROI have been doing in developing their social return on investment framework. Now, given the diversity of organizations that are active in this space, we need to differentiate between the different types of social value that are being generated in the community energy sector. So first of all, we have community benefit. This is generally derived from renewable energy developments. And if we think back to the 2010s, when the feed-in tariff was in place, that's when we really saw the community energy sector grow at its fastest pace in the UK. And lots of organizations were able to basically install kit and reap the benefits of the feed-in tariff to this day, right? Often 25 years. This allowed community energy organizations that were fortunate enough to be able to install, say, solar panels or even wind turbines, to set up community benefit funds. And these have been used locally to support socially valuable activities often. Nowadays, when we talk about community benefit, we usually think in terms of the compensation that a community might receive for hosting new renewable energy infrastructure or transmission lines. So when we think of large onshore wind farms in Scotland or in Wales, for example, they're linked often to community benefit funds. And when it comes to the development of the transmission lines that NESO and so like the National Energy Grid, the National Energy System Operator says that we all need to transition the power from Scotland, where it's being generated, to the demand centres in the south. All these transmission lines, they need to be built somewhere. And so community benefit has been proposed as a way of softening, if you like, the blow to the local communities. So that's one form of community benefit. Now, additional social value is the value which is derived from public procurement. So since the Public Sector Social Value Act 2012, procuring authorities have to consider social value in the procurement of services, and this has been cemented in the Procurement Act 2023. And this kind of social value is proxy-derived monetary value. It's very similar to what Nabil was talking about in terms of like their calculations for the social return on investment. However, when we talk about additional social value, it's very much focused on the local economy, on job creation, and so on. And whereas embedded social value, this is much more down to the actual services that are being provided. So these are the calculations that are generally undertaken on the basis of social return on investment calculations. So these are proxy-derived social return on investment. And these in the UK are principally linked to distribution network operators and gas distribution networks that are mandated by Ofgem to effectively deliver value to their customers. So these are the three types of social value that we're differentiating between. Now, there's lots of legislation around this. So in terms of community benefit, last year, we've had several consultations around community benefit and shared ownership for low carbon energy infrastructure, and it's still being debated exactly what the community benefit will look like. So this is something that we're just kind of monitoring in our research, because it hasn't really been finalized in legislation yet, but we hope to be able to contribute to that debate as our research project progresses. So in terms of additional social value, we have, as I mentioned before, we have the Procurement Act, which is like the key piece of legislation. But not only that, there's the procurement policy note, and the most important one is the PPN 0620, which I've just highlighted there, where social value should be explicitly evaluated in all central government procurement. And they're looking to spread this requirement also to other levels of government, so not just central government. But basically, where legislation is moving towards is that procurement is going to be linked to social value in future, and the more legislation there's around us, the more sophisticated the calculations of social value need to become. However, this is, as I mentioned, this is very much about additional social value, so jobs created. Then finally, this is these are these rule books that Nabil already alluded to. Like we have, for example, the consumer vulnerability rule book, which is for the DNOs, which is effectively a social return on investment rule book, and this is a regulated requirement by Ofgem, right? So now, of course, we have Rio ED3 coming up from the 1st of April, I believe. So there's probably going to be changes in this moving forward. But the point is that these social return on investment calculations, they're being built on an increasingly deep range of calculations, and the ways of approaching these calculations are becoming increasingly sophisticated. So we will in future be able to provide with greater robustness and confidence these kind of calculations. Now, our particular project that we are working on to try to establish what the social values of the community energy sector is, as I mentioned, this is what we're conducting with Community Energy Pathways. And there's one particular project that Community Energy Pathways have been procured to deliver using the Social Value Portal's National TUMS framework. That's the most commonly used social value tool in the procurement sector. I'll mention a bit more about that in the next slide. But crucially, this particular project, the Community Energy People's Project, is funded by the National Lottery, and it seeks to create 33 paid jobs and 100 volunteer roles across these 11 community energy organisations. And so, as I mentioned, the Social Value Portal, we've been using the social, well, I say now, Community Energy Pathways have been using the Social Value Portal's National TUMS framework to work out what the social value of the Community Energy People's Project is. Alongside, we're looking, of course, to develop or to to gain a deeper understanding of what a social return on investment is. And that's, of course, where we're looking to the kind of work that National Energy Action is doing, and that SIA Partners did with the social return on investment rulebook, because we believe these frameworks are probably more suited to actually capture the entirety of the social value which is being generated by the community energy sector. Of course, bearing in mind that we'll never be able to capture the entirety, but they will at least provide a much better picture in terms of what the social value is being generated. And so going back again to our theoretical framework around the transaction costs. So what we're interested in is we're capturing the transaction costs involved in determining the appropriate scale and depth of social value measurement, so variables, metrics, gathering, cleaning, and processing data to facilitate social value measurement, and then ultimately also the calculation and the verification of social value data. Now, so far, we've only really done this as part of this Community Energy People project using the Social Value Portal's National TOMS framework. And there's several of these national TOMS that have been identified that we could capture in the sector. These are the range, like these headline national TOMS, so these themes, if you like, that we have been trying to capture. And the social value generated from this Community Energy Peoples project, and now bearing in mind, this isn't from all 11 of these projects, it is from 7 of the 11 projects. But in 2024-2025, this project generated about £1 million of social value. However, if we break down this calculation on the left-hand side, we can see that actually 998,000 of these 1.055 million was through local employment, right? And at the bottom, we can see 45,000 was through community support. Now, this suggests that the social value portal is obviously quite good at capturing these kind of local economy factors, which are of great importance to procuring authorities, such as local authorities. However, it is less suitable for capturing the actual outcome of the services that these community energy organizations provide, which is what we believe that social return on investment tools, such as the one that National Energy Action is now using, is probably more suitable to do. Now, I've also been involved in the development of an SROI tool myself. I can drop the link into the chat later. This was 6 years ago, I was involved in the development of an SROI tool at the University of Bristol, and we analysed data from some community energy organisations in the southeast of England. And we have, so one organisation that we worked with at that point was Southeast London Community Energy. So the abbreviation there, the top right, you can see SELCE, is Southeast London Community Energy. And so we worked with Southeast London Community Energy to work out what the social return on investment of their operations were, if you like, of the services that they were providing. And at this point, this is now, of course, pre-energy price spike and Russia's invasion of the Ukraine. This is pre-energy price caps and everything. At this point, one of the most valuable services that community energy organizations could do was actually help people switch suppliers. At the top right, we can see the percentage of clients that SELCE was able to switch suppliers and the average they managed to achieve in the process. So, for example, in 2018, 2019, 5% of the clients that reached out to them were switched to a new energy provider, and the average saving from switching was about 298. Now, this figure we put into the SROI tool that we developed. So on the left-hand side, we have this figure of 298 at the top. And then we, based on an open source framework, which is provided by the New Economics Foundation, we developed this SROI tool. And we also found some other proxy figures from a range of different sources. So, for example, we have switching energy provider, we have the warm home discount, we have WaterSure discounts, behavioral advice savings, and savings from debt management plans. So we managed to find some proxy figures, and then we also worked out some discount rates on that. So again, like a process very similar to what Nabil described. Now, please don't be overwhelmed by the the next slide, you don't really have, this is just to give you an idea of how messy it is when you start developing these tools, okay? So this is then what the spreadsheet looked like that we created to try to capture what the social return on investment was for South East London Community Energy in 2018-2019. Now, here on the left-hand side, you have again switching, warm host discount, water discount, debt advice, and behavioral advice. Now, the key number really that I want to point out is at the bottom right. So there we have the SROI present value versus inputs is around 10, and the net SROI versus net present inputs is around 9. So in other words, the social return on investment that South East London Community Energy generated in 2018-2019 for the kind of data that we were able to capture using the framework that we developed was around 10 to 1, which we believe is quite a good value and quite a good advertisement for the sector as such. And we now want to work on updating this framework with better data and make it a lot more user-friendly for the sector, so that we're not only capturing the jobs that the community sector is generating, but also the social return on investment that it is generating. So alongside this work on social return on investment, we're also doing some work on trying to work out what is valuable for the sector itself. So based on a relatively brief survey of the 11 community energy organizations, bearing in mind that sometimes more than one person answered a question from these 11. So hence we have N19, as you can see in the top right. We asked them on average, how many hours a month does your organization spend on reporting? And as we can see here, there's kind of like, it is probably somewhere around 5 to 10 hours on average these companies spend on reporting. So which might not seem a lot, but if this is an organization with only, say, one full-time employee and then a couple of volunteers, there is quite a lot of effort that needs to go into that. So we need to work on a way of trying to reducing the burden of reporting. And also crucially, we try to work out what is how impactful they feel that the reporting is. And as we can see here, there is a tendency here within different funded projects that they feel like kind of the effort tends to outweigh the impact in terms of reporting. So if we want to make social return on investment reporting impactful, we have to somehow work out how to reduce the effort. This is the point about transaction costs. We have to lower the transaction costs for the organizations involved. Otherwise, there isn't really that much point in capturing the social value data. And finally, the last slide here is, so we asked them as well, what is valuable from a community energy perspective? And we can see here a couple of spikes in the spidergram. So of course, first of all, they're all very keen to address climate change, which is at the top. But the second most valuable outcomes really for community energy organizations are at the bottom, as we can see, financial, which is sharing profits with members, saving people money. Right? And the other one is well-being, creating community connections, improving people's health. Now that's a proxy we haven't really been able to capture appropriately, but we need to somehow work out really how to capture the well-being benefits that community energy can deliver. And so these are the references of the documents that I used, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks for that, Colin. And I really appreciated the way you looked at the different kinds of value that you've been looking at as well, and you know, how embedded social value is a part of that, but it's not the whole either. I thought that was really interesting, and I do not envy you the task of having to look at that from the community energy sector, but thanks for such a really great presentation. I can't see any questions in the chat or QA at the minute, other than, we've got one from Lee. Who's asking if the Ofgem rulebook which you shared is public?
Is that the DNO rulebook?
Yes.
No, it's not. It's not actually. No. And that is just through one of the projects that Community Energy Pathways has been involved with, because they're a client of DNOs. They have to deliver social. So there's community energy organizations that are clients of distribution network operators. So they get funding from distribution network operators to support their vulnerable clients. And they then have to report this to the distribution network operator, and to like align the work and to make sure that they're all working towards the same objective, it has made sense to actually provide the information based on already what is in the DNO rulebook. But that's not public, but it's something that I mean, like it's like all these other calculations, they're based on proxy values, right? And like the original data is all available somewhere on the internet. It's just a question of finding it, right? None of this effectively is rocket science, right? It's just to ensure that you have a robust database. I think this was the like the key point that Nabil pointed out as well. It isn't really such a black box, but there's these evidence-based proxies that one needs to agree on, right? And maybe ultimately that should be maybe DESNES, maybe Ofgem, maybe one of these institutions should have really an open access database on these kind of proxies that everybody can agree on, that are kind of Green Book compliant, that Ofgem is happy with, that DESNES is happy with, that the Cabinet Office is happy with, that procuring authorities are happy with. We need to get to a point where like we basically have a common database of kind of proxy values where we can basically create kind of modular tools based on that everybody can agree on to ensure it's Green Book compliant and so on. But we're not there yet.
Yes, thanks, Colin. I think if I could just speak to that as well. Absolutely, this is about establishing what activities it is that you are delivering, what it is that you're interested in measuring and associating a benefit with, and then being able to identify the proxies that go with that. So it's not so much that the proxies themselves are obscure, it's having that inputs database that sits alongside it, so that evidence to demonstrate where it is the calculations are coming from. Currently, there isn't a central resource available that provides that one standard inputs database for everybody. So we do have different approaches being developed. It doesn't mean to say that one approach is necessarily more valid than another, because it depends on what is of interest to the organisation that wants to understand their value and what activities they're delivering and what benefit categories are in line with what they're doing as well. So it's something that can be standardized, but again, it's something that reflects the organisation which is looking to measure that value as well. So it's kind of infinitely tailored and personal at the same time it is standard, which is quite an obscure comment to make as I make it, but I hope it makes sense on some level anyway. We've got a couple of questions in the chat, and then afterwards I'm happy to speak to the approach that we use at NEA for standardised evaluation, kind of in terms of what we do to gather information from our clients, which helps us gather the evidence which we can use to input into our model. But first of all, Colin, we have a question from Simon Kilshaw asking if the reference to warm home discount is the reference to the community energy organisation advising local users on accessing the discount.
That was actually them signing them up to the discount. So we, in this case, we didn't actually include any warm home discounts that were just advised on, because we were not quite sure what the discount rate would be. We didn't have the resources really to follow that up, because you can advise people on trying to do something and then we, how many people are going to follow it up? So we only include the actual warm home discounts that were officially signed up by people in advice sessions. Just like we only use like the figures on the value of switching suppliers by those 5% of clients that were actually switched to a different supplier, and not the ones that received the advice. But yeah, we probably could develop some kind of sophisticated discount rate system around that, just like what SROI has done, but we didn't have the resources to do that. But in future, we do need to do that. Otherwise, we only really capture really a fraction of what advice is about, right? Because advice is also about empowering people to do it themselves. Now, we don't know, again, how many people follow on the advice, but we need to do more work on that, and we need to also understand in terms of how much it empowers people to become more confident to, for example, in future, go through these processes themselves, because it's also like it's often helping people along a journey out of fuel poverty. Like, you're not going to help somebody out of fuel poverty by providing them with advice, but a couple of advice sessions can often put people on a pathway to think about how they can access the services and the benefits that they're entitled to. And that's something that, yeah, we have relied on proxy figures for that, because we haven't been able to follow that up in our own research. But a lot more research would need to be done on that. But it's also very difficult to do that kind of research, because the kind of communities and people that we're talking about, they're hard to treat is one way to describe them. Easy to ignore is probably more appropriate. It just is generally not very easy to follow up on whether vulnerable people in very vulnerable situations have been able to follow up on advice that they've been provided with. So we always need to bear that in mind when we're trying to conduct research in that space.
I think that speaks to one of the kind of going back to my slides earlier, one of the kind of 7 principles of SROI, you know, about not overclaiming, and it's one of the challenges that we've encountered as well. There's kind of the value that you are sure you create by what you do, and the impacts that you see and the people that you speak with after you've supported with them, but then there is being able to demonstrate that through your data, and when you can't, it means that, you know, you can't claim it even though you're sure it is an impact, and it's one of the reasons within our model we have the drop-off rate set to 100% after a year, because currently within our evaluation we can't prove that the clients that we're helping continue to feel the benefits of the support after 1 year, so we can't claim that it continues to accrue. It's something that we'll look to build into our data collection going forward to hopefully gather that evidence and then inform future iterations of the tool. But if we can't demonstrate it, we just can't build it into the model. Nabil, I don't know if that's anything that you want to speak to as well about kind of overclaiming and making sure that that fits into the robustness of the modelling.
Yeah, I think it's important to, one of the things that you kind of try not to do is to not overclaim. As soon as sort of you know, numbers start getting thrown around that seem like they're maybe a little bit unrealistic is when we would typically advise to, you know, revisit or apply things like discount factors that we spoke about, that I think is ultimately what they're there for, in addition to an opportunity to potentially cater some of those discount factors more to what's happening on the ground to like reflect the realities. But that's probably it's a good point, Jamie.
Yeah, and I think so if it's helpful just from NEA's side, in terms of the kind of data that we collect, we have on the one side we have our client case management data, which means we have the information about the situation of the client when they come into our services, for example, level of fuel debt that they were experiencing, if they had issues with their supply, what the problem was that made them come to NEA in the first place, and then any kind of wraparound problems that they had associated with that. We then also have information about the client demographic profile, their tenure, health conditions, ethnicity, household composition. We have the support which we provided to them, and then we have the recorded outcomes of that support. So did it lead to a PSR sign up, for example? Was that confirmed? What was the financial outcome from a benefits case? So we have that within our client case management data. And then every client which comes into our service gets an evaluation survey. And we have a standardized question menu which we've developed to allow us to measure the outcomes that we are interested in as a charity, to demonstrate that we're meeting our charitable mission. So that means we use the evaluation to look at if we're reducing subjective fuel poverty amongst our clients, if we're improving energy capabilities and financial capabilities, if we're improving thermal comfort at home, if there's a perceived reduction in damp and mold in the property by the client. We look at if clients feel that they have self-reported improvements to their health and well-being, or if there is a kind of a maintenance of health, so we've possibly prevented health from declining further, and whether or not clients themselves link either that improvement or no change to support with the support that we provided. We have questions that use the wellbeing indicators of wellbeing. So we ask clients about 4 measures of their wellbeing before support, and then we ask them how that's changed after support. That gives us numbers around point changes to wellbeing evaluations, which is linked with financial value itself in terms of savings to the NHS, which we can report on. So that's all kind of quite quantitative data, which allows us to understand the nature of our client base and the outcomes that we achieve. And then we have a number of questions and opportunities for clients to give qualitative accounts, tell us their stories, which we then kind of use to understand the kind of quant data that we're seeing. All of that comes together to paint the picture of what we do and the difference we make. And it's that kind of in its collective way that has helped us to inform the tailoring of our model to the extent that we've been able to by working with SROI, because we have those different data points. Different organisations are going to be at different points in that journey. So some of it might be yes, there's a need to calculate SROI, but before that, there's things that can be done in terms of outcomes and impact evaluation, which aren't necessarily going to give an SROI figure, but they can be really important along that journey. So some of it is just understanding the stage that different organisations are at, and different capacity requirements of that internally, and how that can work. And if it's a case of how we evaluate internally, I'm more than happy to have conversations with people about our approach, if it's helpful at all. But it's kind of, that's the way that we do it internally. I'm just looking at any other questions. Colin, I can see you've popped a link in the chat. Is that in response to the question about the tool being open source?
Yeah, so that's something that we're trying to work out, because at the moment we're putting in a lot of resources, as in so I've applied for some research funding, so this is public research money, so the outcomes of that will be open source. That's why there's also this the original SROI tool. So some of those some of the data that I presented there from 2018, 2019, that's basically all explained in that document that I shared, is how to set up an SROI tool based on that. Now, because there's also resource being put in by Community Energy Pathways in this, and basically taking a risk on that, we have to see in what kind of format the ultimate SROI tool will be, whether there's one that maybe we could kind of like a bare bones one, which is like other organizations like the Social Value Portal, for example. They also offer like this bare bones version that is available. So we have to see whether we're in a position to do the same thing, and then also have a more bespoke model, which then can go into all these kind of levels of detail. Well, not quite the same level of detail as Jamie mentioned that NEA goes into, but that it might become like a modular approach, because again, like, it depends on the type of organization and the kind of data that they're able to gather, what kind of tool is really ultimately useful, and what kind of metric and output is the most useful, whether it is SRI or just a more kind of basic social value statement to maybe satisfy a procuring authority or something like that. So yeah, we'll have to have a think about that.
Brilliant, thank you. I can't see any more questions in the chat or Q&A. Is there anyone who has a comment or a question which they'd like to make live? Nope, that's no problem at all. As I mentioned, we'll share the slides and a recording of the meeting afterwards. So I know myself, Nabil and Colin, and I think Nicole has left us, but Nicole as well, I'm more than happy to kind of take the discussion further offline if anyone has any kind of questions or points that they'd like to chat through. As I'm saying that, I can see Laura, you've hand raised, so I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. Sorry, we're very bit lastminute.com. So I mean, I really appreciate, it was so interesting to hear all the speakers today, and I really appreciate being involved. I'm I'm sort of representative of a very small community charity. So we're about 3 full-time equivalent members of staff. So it does slightly fill me with horror when I can see all these data and tables and things like that. And we've kind of developed our own way of measuring these things. I just wondered really in terms of NEA, obviously it's brilliant that you guys have really got a very comprehensive reporting structure and you're able to demonstrate these things in terms of your outputs for your energy team, but you're also kind of representative, like a bit of an umbrella group for your members as well. So I just like, I mean, it's very impressive what you've developed, but I think, is there a way that there could be some more quick wins for some standardized outcomes that could be shown kind of across your members, if you like, that they could feed in on a sort of very basic reporting level, something that isn't too arduous, could be done, I don't know, annually, something like that would be my preference. And then, some overall figures could be demonstrated within that, but also maybe providing like an initial like a blueprint for something that's a bit more standardized, because obviously it's really, isn't it brilliant to have bespoke, but if that's just not available to lots of people, there's a lot of data that just isn't being captured at all at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely understand where you're coming from. It's something that we've been discussing with SROI as well. I think in the first instance, from our perspective, we want to get an understanding from where the demand within the sector for that would be, the kind of organisations who might be interested in taking it up, what your service delivery looks like, how much it aligns with what NEA delivers, and how much it would be kind of more in line with a standardised approach. So we kind of want to be able to get an understanding of where the appetite for that is, and who it's coming from first, to be able to have those discussions, and then look at what the possible options could be going forward. It's just hard to kind of plan that out before we know where the interest lies. So I think in the first instance, I'd encourage you to follow the link which is within Nabil's slides, and Nabil, maybe you'd be happy to pop it in the chat as well when you can, and I'll circulate it after the meeting, just to kind of pop your details down and register interest, and then we'll be able to follow up to have that discussion as well, because it would just be really helpful for us to get a kind of picture of what that looks like and how it could work as well. So it's not a case of yes, it's possible, or no, it's not possible. It's more, we're also like right at the beginning of this journey and working out how it works. So we kind of want to work that out with everyone else as well. Sorry, I hope that's helpful. Like I'm saying a lot of obtuse things today. Brilliant. Well, did anyone else have any other, I can see you've popped the link there. Thanks, Nabil. Was there any other questions or comments from anybody else? Nope. Fabulous. Well, just wanted to say thank you so much for everybody joining, and thanks to all of our speakers. Nicole, I know you've left, but if you do watch the recording, thank you so much. And again to Colin and Nabil, really insightful presentations. I feel like I learn something new every time I dip into this, which just shows the complexity of it all, but it just shows how engaging all the presentations were. So thank you for that. We will look to book in next meeting of the network further in the year, so I'll send out a save the date when we have that. If anyone has any ideas or suggestions for future topics or themes that they'd like to see in a meeting, or any suggestions for speakers, feel free to get in touch, and we can kind of build the next meeting around the interests of our members. So yeah, thanks a lot everyone, and I'll give you 20 minutes back in your day. Bye.
Thanks all.
Thank you. Goodbye.